Welcome to Digital Oil and Gas with Geoffrey Cann. I'm Geoffrey. Digital Oil and Gas looks at the impact of digital technology on the global oil and gas industry. If you want to discuss this week's topic further, or just stay in touch, you can always reach me at Geoffrey Cann on Twitter or at geoffreycann.com. Welcome back to Digital Oil and Gas. My name is Geoffrey, and today I want to have a conversation on the topic of intellectual property, IP management, with a goal to try and frame for those of us who are in the world of the development of IP, tech entrepreneurs, but may also be individuals buried deep inside oil and gas companies that are working on innovation and R&D, about the imperative to protect the IP and how one goes about doing that. And so today I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike McLean, who works for the IP Collective and based in Ottawa. Mike, welcome to Digital Oil and Gas.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Nice to be here.
Now, I know you're not an oil and gas guy, but you spend a lot of time working particularly in energy-related areas. But let's begin a little bit with your personal background. Like, where did you come from? How did you end up in this area of dealing with intellectual property?
A very unplanned path. My education background is electrical engineering. Coming out of my undergrad, I joined a company in Ottawa called, at the time, Semiconductor Insights, became Tech Insights. And that business was focused on reverse engineering of semiconductor and electronics products and selling the data obtained through that reverse engineering to help tech companies benchmark their designs, understand their cost base, but also to protect their patent portfolios.
Yeah.
It was used as evidence of patent infringement.
Yeah, there's a lot of so the purpose of the reverse engineering, because there's two ways to look at this, I think. One is you reverse engineer something so that you can take the technology, and this is the concern why America puts export restrictions on much of American technology into the world. You're trying to protect it, but at the same time, if you suspect your technology has been stolen, or you also have to reverse engineer out, and so I think that's the service you're providing. That's reverse engineering.
Exactly. It was basically the CSI of the patent world.
Oh, right.
Gathering evidence that companies can take into licensing negotiations, into litigation, as they look to enforce their rights.
Oh, wow. Can you tell some stories about? You probably know no names, but
the best ones are highly confidential. But it was great exposure to how large companies use IP to benefit their businesses, how they protect revenue streams very aggressively, the strategies they employ to do so. But on the flip side, I was also part of a small Canadian business that was growing its own IP position. It was a database business. With patents and trade secrets around how that data was generated and how it was delivered to customers, and its own trademark and other issues. So got to see basically both sides of the spectrum. What are the issues that impact small entities, and how are the big established ventures utilizing IP at the other end?
At the other end, yeah. How big a concern or worry is this? I mean, you're sitting in the world of dealing with this. I can see a clear pathway for someone to say strip down some technology for the purposes of copying it in country and avoiding dealing with patents and the like. Is this a big problem? Like, I know there's counterfeit goods, but when we talk about IP, how big an issue is this?
So in my previous role, most of that work was not direct copying, but it was extracting value for rights that were owned. Yes, there were some issues of copying, in particular in certain jurisdictions, and the need to defend that. But the vast majority of it is competitive products in a given marketplace and determining how the margins in that marketplace are going to be distributed.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is absolutely a big deal now in the world of energy and energy transition, because we are starting to see new costs emerging, carbon prices themselves, data is now perceived to have significant value. And if you shift away from being, I think, a hardware, you sell a hardware item to the oil and gas industry, your cash and cost structures are actually quite, you're predictable. What happens when you change gears and create a subscription type business? Like how do you now secure that cash flow? And of course, that gets tied to banking rules and the like. I'm sure that's the kind of the reason why companies get quite interested in this topic, huh?
Very much so, and that's a key piece, right? A lot of companies or a lot of individuals think of IP as protecting invention, and it is that. But more importantly, it's about protecting and creating business options to commercialize that invention. Right? How do you preserve optionality as a business to enable different revenue streams, to test different business models? What is the technology that is going to enable those business models? It's going to enable differentiation in a market and allow you to access revenue that gets tied to margin, that gets tied to capital, and the chance to grow and really get to scale.
So tell me about the IP Collective then. What is what is its purpose as an entity?
The Innovation Asset Collective is a pilot project funded with a $30 million investment from the federal government, more specifically from the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Industry. And it's part of the National IP Strategy. And it's testing, can a collective approach really ramp the capacity for Canadian businesses to use IP strategy as part of how they scale their ventures?
What do you mean by collective approach? Like if I'm one company, how does collaboration with others, the notion of a collective, actually create value here?
So it allows for an efficient use of resource. So we are building education programs to help train these professionals within these organizations on how to implement strategy. Right. If we're going to do that for one company, much more effective if we do it for 50 or 100 or 200 companies.
Oh, right on. And so there's a federal government funded program to create the capacity to do this, not to actually do it necessarily, but to create the capacity for others to do it.
There are some pieces we are doing, and it's around shared data and shared IP rights. So we are building inventories of studies into markets related to clean tech and the patent rights that are associated with those to help companies that we're dealing with navigate those spaces more effectively and to adapt their strategies to competitive situations. And we're also out acquiring and building a patent portfolio of our own, so that as businesses scale, if they face a patent assertion from a large market incumbent, we can provide them with rights that they can use to balance that playing field if their own portfolios aren't mature enough to do so.
Right, exactly right. And so the if you looked inside the range of things that fall within the remit, what are the sorts of things that should be protected, or should companies, if they're thinking about this as a concern, what are the domain areas or the types of assets, I think, that protection is either weak or needs to be bolstered? I think you've mentioned data already as one, but maybe you could elaborate what other ones are out there.
Data is a huge and of growing importance. If you look at the other rights that are out there to protect innovation, patents is usually at the top of people's lists. Trade secrets, very, very important. Trademarks to protect some of the branding and differentiation around the products that are being created using those technologies. Copyright tied to the software code that's going to be creating a lot of the feature sets and doing a lot of the processing of data and other information. So there's a range of rights, and really the use or leverage of any one of those is dictated by the specifics of your business, and really needs to be tied into a strategy that encompasses what is the market you're serving, what is the competitive environment you're seeing, what rights are available, and then how do you create a portfolio or a lattice of rights that really creates leverage for your business within that environment and allows you to use that to drive revenue growth, to drive greater margin within that revenue, all tied into that strategic outcome.
And is there a perspective here that Canadian businesses, maybe not the really large entities who already operate globally, but I think the assumption here is that at some level, Canadian entrepreneurs are not as protected as they need to be in the new world. Is that a fair statement?
Very much so. If you look at the data, there's a report from the World IP Organization in 2017. Canada was 20th in patents, 16th in trademarks, and there were no Canadian companies in the top 100 patent applicants worldwide that year. So it's a distinct problem.
All right. And so for Canadian entrepreneurs who might be thinking that they've signed a non-disclosure agreement with some of their business partners in their ecosystem, and they feel like, I'm done, we're good. That's probably a false assumption then.
Very, very much so. We see that statement, or I've filed a provisional patent, I'm good.
Yeah.
As the two really frequent statements, and it really shows a lack of understanding of how to build leverage positions, how IP can lead to growth, and what strategies and tactics can be employed to really maximize the impact there. There's great stats showing even owning one IP right, you have a 21% greater chance of growing. And you compare SMEs, 9% of Canadian SMEs, I think worldwide SMEs own IP versus 60% of larger entities. Just shows what it takes to get to scale, the type of assets that need to be available to those businesses.
So what is it? What's going on here that entrepreneurs are not taking the time to adequately protect their IP? Are they feeling like, speed to market is actually the priority here and not protection of what they've got?
So I think worldwide, if you look at entrepreneurs and SME type ventures, there's some common pieces, and I think there's some pieces unique to Canada. So more broadly, SMEs and new ventures have limited funds and limited time.
Yeah.
And they have to prioritize where to deploy those resources. And they're typically going to deploy them on building out their product and selling that product. Until they can get market traction, anything else needs to wait. And that's reality. Mm. If you look at the Canadian environment, there's some other factors that impact things. Our largest companies are resource companies or financial institutions.
Yep, that would be true in oil and gas. The four big oil companies in Canada are now 70% of all oil production, and
exactly.
And it's our country's largest export industry. So the concentration here is huge, really. When you look at it through that lens.
And relatively to, say, semiconductors, wireless telecom, the patent density or the IP density in those industries is quite low. So as a result, and where we do have those type of businesses or organizations in Canada, they're typically branch offices of larger multinationals where the IP decisions are being made elsewhere, right? They're being made in Europe, they're being made in the United States, they're being made in Korea or Japan. So we don't build the capacity or the understanding of how to make these decisions, how to set these strategies, how to implement these programs. That capacity just doesn't exist to any great extent in Canada.
And hence the purpose of the collective, to try and fix this, create the capacity. So I'm going to guess then that a lot of entrepreneurs and companies that are funding R&D or developments might not even know that something they should put some IP protection around is worthy. Another, you know what I mean? Like it's like there's the money on the sidewalk and you just walk over it because you don't know that it's money. And yeah. I think that's probably a way to think about this problem.
Yeah, we've seen two distinct mindsets there. One that innovation isn't significant enough to protect, right? It's just an improvement over existing technology. It's not a step function rocket blast of innovation going off in someone's mind that is
Yep.
that huge aha moment.
Yep.
But in fact, you've solved a real problem that likely is going to have a business outcome tied to it. And if you own that improvement, you have a greater chance of really commercializing that improvement.
It reminds me of this crazy expanding world of NFTs now. You know, you could look at the world's first tweet from Elon Musk, and that's now like an NFT is like patenting something. You can signal like I own this, and you know, in the NFT world, people are figuring out all kinds of things will have market value. We don't know why or how that value might be perceived by others, but it doesn't matter. The fact that someone perceives it means it's value, so you should protect it. So coming back to your example, let's imagine I come up with some improvement to a process, and I choose not to patent it or protect it in any fashion. And someone comes along and then builds on top of that. They've now advanced a little bit. I'm not being compensated for my contribution, but they're building on my idea. I have no recourse at that stage because I've not taken the time to capture my ownership right. Is that fair to say?
That is a very accurate description. Yeah.
And so, if I did protect that, what does this mean now for the company that comes along, and then has a sort of a slight improvement even on my idea? Am I able to? What are my rights in that situation?
Well, it depends on how you've protected it. But say you've patented that piece, and the improvement needs to utilize your technology. With that patent, you have the right to exclude that other company from practicing your piece of that. And
unless there's some kind of compensation or structured agreement
exactly. That's the alternative there, right? Is to negotiate a business transaction that sees compensation flow your way. And when I earlier talked about the distribution of margin within a given market, that's really what I'm talking about. As you establish ownership over key pieces of technology, it allows you to have a greater share of that margin.
Is there a way to put a framing around what we're missing out as Canadians here? Like what is our loss, if you like? Or put another way, what's the upside gain we could have? Because after all, Canadians we don't think of ourselves this way, but as a society, we're well educated, we're exposed to very demanding problems. We survive in a nasty place. Like it's cold and wet and miserable here most of the time. Canadians are very good at solving problems, but it seems to me we are not doing nearly as good a job as we should be in taking ownership of these innovations and improvements. So hence the question, what are we missing here?
56% of Canadian invented patents are owned by foreign companies.
56%.
Yes.
So if you like, the non-resident organizations and individuals are staking claim to things that exist because of Canada, and solving the problems we have here. And we're not that. So any compensation or structure arrangements associated with compensation for that goes overseas.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know why people listeners wouldn't be thoroughly pissed off. To be honest, that's how I feel.
Absolutely, right? And you can be frustrated and pissed off about it, or you can do something about it. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Is really help Canadian organizations change that. We want to revolutionize how SMEs in Canada address IP.
Yeah.
That they have constructive strategies that take into account the competitive environment, take into part the customer problems that they're solving, the IP positions that they potentially could obtain, understand 5 years out, 10 years out, if there's business outcomes that we are looking to achieve, what are the IP positions that need to be built to enable that success? And creating roadmaps to build the portfolios of rights. Heard a company speak recently, and they talked about creating a lattice of rights that each supported, each sort of piece of that supported the other pieces. And I really like that description. And that's what we're looking for here is there's a strategy, a plan that builds these positions that over time really create ownership, really create leverage. And then allow Canadian companies to be compensated properly for the innovation that's occurring here.
Yeah. Remember, you mentioned earlier, just a second ago, that 56% of the patents in Canada are actually owned by foreign registered individuals or companies. In other words, not owned by Canadians. Does this mean that foreigners are registering Canadian-developed IP in Canada so they own it? Or does it mean that they are registering foreign-owned IP in Canada so that they own it? In other words, like I've developed something, say, in Europe, and I patent it for the Canadian marketplace. I'm foreign-owned.
That stat is patents coming from Canadian inventors.
56% are actually in the hands of people outside of Canada.
Correct.
Well, I suppose in some cases you would sell it to them, and then that's fine too. But at least you took the time to protect it. But I suspect the reality is the patents are being locked in here without adequate compensation. Hence the reason.
Absolutely. I think it's whether you're selling the patents or you're selling a business at an early stage pre-scale, which happens more and more here. Yeah. Right. Technology companies get to first step, and their exit is a sale to a foreign entity, and the IP then exits, and the future proceeds and profits from that IP
also gone,
flow away.
Yeah.
So we really would like to see Canadian companies get to scale here, so they can provide a source of gravity for Canadian originated IP, and we're really lacking those sources of gravity in the current tech ecosystem in Canada.
Yeah, and that's a shortcoming. Where do you think? I mean, is it the legal community doesn't get this, or is it there are not enough lawyers that focus on this, or is it CEOs and boards are not informed enough to, or is it the entrepreneurs themselves just don't understand?
So you just created the list. That is my list. So if companies themselves don't understand, and that's for the reasons I talked about earlier.
Yep.
The law firms and service providers in Canada aren't structured to help as much as they could. There's some great individuals, really knowledgeable and experienced individuals in that. So I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of IP service providers in Canada can make a huge amount of money filing patents for foreign companies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. The flow of inbound ideas, I mean, because it's a big world and we're a small country, the amount of ideas out there you could register in Canada, you create a business just doing that.
And the hourly billing model that most of those firms follow makes it challenging to invest the time to educate small new businesses.
Yeah.
Right. They need a lot of handholding.
Yeah.
And I've led a business where that didn't make economic sense to do so. We focused on large multinational players who could pay the bills.
Yeah, precisely.
But the system isn't set up for those players to help these type of companies.
Yeah.
The board depth is really lacking, and there's just been a new program launched in Canada that we were a part of. So the Council of Canadian Innovators launched innovation governance program 2-3 months ago to train prospective board members on governance of IP, governance of data, governance of cybersecurity, key issues in the future economy, or really in the economy today.
Yeah, I think
600 applicants for 100 seats. Shows the demand that's out there for that type of information.
Yeah, the Institute of Corporate Directors might be another locus for getting this kind of programming going, because the ICD is the gold standard for corporate directorship training in Canada. So, but this is not just a board question. This ultimately is a management question. The management has to allocate the resources, and if they choose, as you point out, you've been in those meetings where you're going to go, they're going to cost us $500 an hour to do what exactly? Or I can spend $500 and create some marketing material that I can use to go and grow revenue. Yeah, I know where you'd put your $500.
Absolutely. And that's part of our model is to address that, is we have funding that can be provided to SMEs for IP focused activity, whether that be filing a new patent, whether that be developing a strategy, whether that be investigating the IP landscape in a given space. We have funding available to help SMEs undertake that type of work and that type of analysis so they can be successful.
Yeah. Are there countries that are really good at this, that are kicking our butt here?
If you look at the most recent surveys, you're talking South Korea, you're talking Switzerland, you're talking Singapore as some of the top countries in terms of figuring out the innovation and IP piece at a high level. So
you've named 3 countries, if I could. One of the common themes between all of them, no natural resources.
Yep.
The only resource is people and their ideas. And so, yeah.
They had to figure out a long time ago how they're going to compete in an international marketplace.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is an imperative. And as we sort of think about our world, energy transition, decarbonization, new energy sources as an economy, the pathway here for us cannot simply be we've found a cheaper source of lithium, so we're going to just mine it. That's the South Koreans are going to turn around and create the lithium manufacturing process to own all of the lithium battery technology. We as a country, we should be owning some of that, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I'm going to put myself in the shoes of someone listening to this. They may now be saying to themselves, okay, what do I do now? Like what do you tell companies if you're engaging with them so that they, get onto this and get ahead of this? Is there like a playbook they follow? Is there specific 2 or 3 things they should do straight away?
To me, it all starts with strategy, right? And you can go to almost any IP conference, any IP seminar, and someone will make the statement that IP strategy needs to be linked or integrated with business strategy.
Yeah.
But very few people talk about how to do that. And I think that's one of the key things we're working to educate the companies we're engaged with is how to create that linkage between the IP strategy and the business strategy, how to analyze their marketplace, how to analyze their competitive environment, how to understand the types of problems that they're solving, what is different than the other players in the space, what are they really selling on, right?
Yeah.
Why is someone paying X dollars for your product and Y dollars for somebody else, or choosing your product over somebody else's? What are the things that enable that transaction?
Yeah.
And let's think through what aspects of that can be protected and how to protect those, and build a roadmap to really establish a strong position and a strong ownership layer there that's going to create sustainable advantage.
Yeah, it's this latest question, I think, that you've talked about. So such a great mental analogy here, because the elements build and support each other. Is the cross connections between the market sensing, market opportunity, intellectual property fit, the ecosystem connections, even the tools you use to protect your IP. All of that stuff has to kind of fit together into a cohesive whole. If people want to learn more about this, Mike, where do they go? Where's the website?
ipcollective.ca.
Super easy.
It is.
Can't miss it. And aside from the physical presence in Ottawa, how does the program carry out its outreach activities to connect up with entrepreneurs? Are you running webinars, seminars, live streams? What do you do to try and raise the message here?
So I'm based in Ottawa. We don't actually have a physical presence here. Our organization was launched mid-COVID. So we are
pure virtual. Yeah.
And more importantly than the COVID situation, we wanted to access talent across the country. So we have staff currently ranging from Montreal to Victoria, spread in Ottawa, Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, Calgary, really where there is tech and IP talent. We've sourced key members of our team. In terms of how we engage potential companies that are going to work with us, there's really three paths to that. We try and make as much presence through our website and social media as possible.
Yep.
We do have a sales team that is out contacting companies and identifying companies that may have interest. We're also partnering with other parts of the ecosystem that are either aligned with us from a industry perspective or that provide regional coverage across the country. So, for example, we have a great partnership with SDTC. Work very closely with them around the companies they're funding, and work to engage with their funding companies quite closely, as well as helping them with their own IP strategy. Regionally, we've set up a partnership with with OCI here in Ontario. We're working with the other provinces as well, where there are major innovative centers to do similar things that can provide education out through their organizations, and they provide sources of companies to us through their networks.
Well, there you go. If we want to compete with South Korea, Singapore, and Switzerland, the three S's, this is what we got to do. Mike, thank you very much for coming on Digital Oil and Gas today and sharing the story around IP protection, innovation, growth, IP strategies. This has been a real eye-opener, and I hope folks listening to this will take on board the imperative to consider their IP as an integral part of their growth strategy. Thanks again.
Thanks, Geoffrey. Really appreciate the time. Great conversation.
This has been another episode of Digital Oil and Gas. If you like what you've heard, please press that like button and leave a comment. I'll get back to you, or Mike will, and by all means share this so that others in your network can listen to this story about IP protection among all the others on the podcast. I will return in a week's time with another episode. Bye for now.